We'll explore how federal leadership can support transformative infrastructure, modernize trade, and foster economic resilience in sectors like clean tech, aerospace, and agri-tech. And so I am honored to introduce our panelists today. We have with us Representative Marilyn Strickland, representing Washington's 10th District. She is a champion for inclusive economic development and infrastructure investment. Congressman Strickland's 10th District encompasses parts of Pierce and Thurston counties. She was elected to Congress in 2020, where she made history as the first African-American to represent Washington State at the federal level, and one of the first Korean-American women elected to Congress. She's a former two-time mayor of Tacoma and past president and CEO of the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. She brings a strong background, as you can see, in civic leadership and economic development, and she currently serves at the federal level on the House Armed Services Committee and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. She's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus and also the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. Representative Rick Larsen serves as Washington's 2nd Congressional District, and he has been a key advocate for sustainable transportation, aviation innovation, and resilient infrastructure. Congressman Larsen's district includes portions of Snohomish, Skagit, and Whatcom counties. He has served in Congress since 2001, making him the ranking member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And in addition to the advocacy I mentioned above for sustainable transportation, aviation, and infrastructure, he has been a vocal supporter of U.S. Canada trade relations, particularly in the context of cross-border transportation and economic development in the Pacific Northwest. So please join me in welcoming our two panelists as we dive into a conversation about the future of our region and the role in Congress in shaping it. Okay, let me sit on the end, Marilyn, if I could. Oh, I should say Representative Strickland. Great. Okay, but before we start the panel conversation, perhaps each of you would like to share some initial thoughts. Congressman Strickland, do you want to begin?
Hello.
There you go.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to Matt, Steve, Representative Rue, and the Pacific Northwest Economic Region for hosting this and having us here today. And I also want to thank the representatives from the Canadian government, just to underscore how important the relationship is between the United States and Canada. And I think that's something that, given the current political climate, I think it's something we must repeat ad nauseum. And I say this because whenever a president is elected in this country, regardless of the party affiliation, you want him or her to be successful and to do well. You want them to strengthen relationships with our allies. You want us to lead the world the way people expect us to. And you want to focus on an economy that works for every single person in this great country. And because we are seeing the opposite happen, I want to let you know I'm not here to be hyper-partisan and to bash someone, but as a member of Congress and as someone who is deeply dedicated to this relationship between the U.S. and Canada, I have a duty to be completely honest with you. So I will leave it at that, but I look forward to this conversation. But please know that this relationship between the United States and Canada is strong. That's the majority opinion in the United States House of Representatives and in the Senate. And we'll do everything in our power to make sure that it remains strong. Thank you.
So in preparing for this, there was some discussion about how we should present, and I think the Penwar said, well, you could have 10 minutes at the podium, and I think my staff said, well, I think 3 minutes sitting down is fine. And so I'm compromising, and I'll sit down and speak for 10 minutes. I have a few longer comments on this relationship to get getting snow on here, but if you drive from here to Vancouver, that's my district. So I describe it to people. It's actually a little farther. It starts a little farther north. Includes San Juan Islands and Island County as well. So I say to people that no one lives in my district, but they all own property there. I'm sure half of you own property in my district as well. So it's a great place to be from. I was born and raised up there, and I want to talk about start there because the U.S. Canada relationship has always been important to me even before being in Congress. So take you back, I'm celebrating my 60th year this year, my 60th anniversary on Earth this year. And so I was born and raised in Arlington, pre-cable, pre-Spotify, over-the-air TV, over-the-air radio. So we watched Hockey Night in Canada on CBU or CBC or CBUT on Channel 2, like every other kid in Vancouver, British Columbia did. I grew up listening to CFox 99.3 in Vancouver as well. And even today, I listen to KSM out of Bellingham and Q 109.3 in Victoria. The Q, frankly, because the reception's a lot better coming from the north than from Seattle stations. So, and I get my morning dose of Canadian news from Cliff Kane on the Ed Bain show, the morning show. So that is then, and that's kind of why this interest in Canada has always been with me. But today, there's over 10,000 people who work in my district at Canadian-owned companies, journalism, fisheries, manufacturing, maritime. And I think when talking about the issues between U.S. and Canada, especially the border, we'll come back to this thing quickly, but managing these border issues is about many things. It's about trade, it's about transportation, it's about the environment, it's about people-to-people ties, and it's about the border itself. And I want to start with trade tariffs. As of last month, Canadian travelers from BC to Washington State going through Whatcom County, the border, decreased by 43% versus a year ago, 2024. That's according to the Whatcom County, Whatcom Council of Government. So travelers from BC to Washington State through Whatcom County. For travelers from all of Canada to Whatcom County, the decrease is about 31%. Online purchases, and this made big news in Vancouver, not so much in the US. Online purchases from US retailers are down down 14%, and travel purchases in the US from Canadians, from BC, are down 27%, and that's according to a Advancing Credit Union report that came out last month. Give you a couple examples of what this means. Point-to-point parcel, a local Point Roberts shipping company that survived 24 years, closed in May. They just can't deal with the tariffs. It's just too much. From January to June, sales at the international marketplace of Point Roberts, the only grocery store closed, fallen 20%. And Northwest Yarns, a small business in Bellingham, estimates that a loss of about 20% of its sales due to the loss of Canadian customers. So my message is trade good, tariffs bad, when it comes down to it. So some legislation Congress is dealing with on that. I'm trying to deal with. I do want to say that not all is lost. Obviously, in U.S. Canada relations, it would be ridiculous to say so. And next summer, we have a great opportunity in the Northwest with Seattle and Vancouver hosting 13 World Cup matches for the FIFA World Cup in June and July. Visit Seattle projects a minimum of $929 million we generated in King County for over 6 World Cup matches in Seattle. The BC government estimates about $830 million in generated dollars. These estimates don't include what Snohomish County or Skagit or Whatcom or so many counties down here might do. And good news, the recent reconciliation bill for all of its ugly faults does include $625 million for cities, for host cities, for security, planning operations, and this is the full amount requested. Seattle will get about $31.5 million of that. I'm also going to co-lead some legislation to authorize appropriations for transportation improvements. However, I will note the U.S. is perilously close to being unwelcoming to soccer fans for the world. For the single largest sporting event, 5 billion people will watch these games over the 5 weeks of this around the world. But not all of them coming to the U.S., but a lot of them will be. And travel bans and long visa wait times are already causing declining international visits. And so I'm working with the White House task force on the World Cup to ensure that the administration is taking these issues seriously. One constant in this relationship in the Northwest and the Canadian Pacific, I went online to figure out what the Canadians call the West. We call it Pacific Northwest, but you're in the southwest. Canada, so I'm gonna call West, thank you, the West Coast. I'm working to pass the bipartisan surface transportation bill, continues the job creating infrastructure investments that started with President Biden's signature law. These include prior priorities of upgrading and expanding 3 of our 4 border crossings, investment in Cascade high-speed rail, continued investment in Amtrak, and completion, we won't fund this, you all are, Canadians are BNSF or CP or CN, completion of the pre-clearance investment at Pacific Central Station. So 2 more issues. One is on the environment. It's a constant imperative for cross-border cooperation in conjunction with First Nations people of Canada, Native Alaskans, and the tribes of the Pacific Northwest. That includes ensuring the livelihood of the southern resident killer whale population for a lot of reasons and ancillary reasons, and includes cross-border oil spill response coordination between U.S. and Canadian Coast Guards, and the Coast Guard bill that will be taking up on the floor of the House this Wednesday and in DC does recognize this importance of the cross-border Coast Guard cooperation. Now, energy, following environment with energy, and seem unusual, but it also shows how complex this relationship is. The Columbia River Treaty is going through what is known as an America First review. I don't know what that means at the State Department, honestly, but it is delaying an agreement that isn't going to get much better for either country and can only get worse. So I would call upon the State Department to get it going and get it done. Then if you talk to the 4 refineries that are in my district, and I have 4 of the 5 refineries in the state, 30 to 50% of the crude that they refine at those refineries comes from Canada. So what conclusion would you have after all this? The one is the relationships are deep and wide across the border. They're going to last well beyond the current administration, and the next one, whoever it is, will have to make their own choices about what to do about it. We in this region don't have to wait for that, nor can we, because there's a lot of work to do. And I'll conclude with a quote from Andy Anderson. I see Denny back here and all, and they know who Andy is on a man public list. So Andy Anderson was worked for my Democratic predecessor a billion years ago. Worked for Al Swift, and then when Al retired, Andy was out of commission for about 6 years, and I hired Andy back. He was an eminence Reese in the Pacific Northwest. He is actually the father, grandfather, and all the relatives of the original Nexus program. It was his idea. It was back then. So I hired him, and he said to me, "Rick, you will never solve issues at the border.
This guy.
You will only manage them better than they have been." So our goal is to manage these issues better every day and avoid the unforced errors that we sometimes create for ourselves. We have the foundation to do that if we don't break it. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Gonna get noise out.
That was a really comprehensive overview of the various issues that I did not say that.
Very informative.
It was very. Oh, my goodness.
Very
See what
complete.
this panel's going to be like today. But it really gives you an idea of some of the issues that are going to be addressed through the course of over the next couple of days. And so I appreciate that broad overview. And I really like this notion that the time for collaboration is never more important than now. Especially when the issues are maybe harder than they've ever been. You have to rely on trust that has been built up over a period of decades. And really, use that to sort of power through these more difficult times. So I look forward to going a little bit deeper. We have a number of questions that are prepared related to transportation, infrastructure, affordable housing, security, aviation, cross-border travel. So I'm just going to dive right into them. You probably know that you can actually ask questions from your app, your Hutha app. So I've got this handy pad here that will post them as you do that. So if you have those, please be sure to put them in. But Representative Strickland, I'm going to come to you. You've got this long history of economic development with work with the chamber, for example, and as mayor of Tacoma, 2 terms. You are now focusing on you're a member of the American Canadian Economy and Security Caucus. So can you tell us ways in which we might be able to modernize some of the U.S. Canada trades in ways that could help both parties? And I think the writer of this question is particularly interested in how we can benefit small businesses with policies that might be modernized or changed.
Right, well, thank you for that question, and I want to start my response with something that I think elected officials often forget. So we are deep into policy details, and we spend a lot of time having meetings and negotiating and going back and forth and not getting everything we want, but saying that this is really, really good and we can move it forward. What we often forget as policymakers is that we are in the communication business. And I say that because if we are unable to communicate to the people we represent, the general public, and the press in a clear and succinct manner, everything that we're trying to do just gets lost in the fray, and people are grossly misinformed. They don't know what they're talking about, and then we're being asked to do things that we may already be doing or that we can't do. So I always want to preface that. But I think about economic development. I think about it coming from my lens as a local official, my lens as a chamber CEO, and recognizing that even in trade, the biggest beneficiaries of good trade policy are small businesses. When we think of trade, we tend to think of large global multinational companies with tons of resources, brand names that we all know really well. And we often forget that it's small businesses who benefit the most from good trade policy. So of course, one thing we always want to do, and I see my predecessor, Denny Heck here, we want to make sure the XM Bank stays intact. And the idea that we have to renew it on a regular basis, I think is a little bizarre because we will always need it because small businesses tend to be the biggest beneficiaries. When I think about what businesses need, they need certainty more than anything else. And if we have leadership that is communicating to the world, our allies and businesses, that we're going to impose this tariff. No, we're not. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. It's 10% on top of everything else. That creates the most terribly uncertain environment for businesses of all sizes. So first of all, certainty. And I have a note here that my staff that told me, he's talking about the president is talking about levying a 35% duty on Canadian goods starting on August 1st. That makes no damn sense. And so will that stay intact? We don't know. There's still a couple of weeks left in July, but the uncertain environment is very, very poor. Number two, and my colleague Rick Larson knows this, Congress has the authority to impose taxes, not the President of the United States. Congress does. So right now, there is a boundary that is being crossed that doesn't even respect the branches of government, checks and balances, and how this thing is supposed to work. So obviously presidents get involved in negotiating trade policies, but it is actually Congress and the Ways and Means Committee specifically that has the authority to do this. So what kind of help can we give to small businesses? What I often say to folks is the relationships that Rick described in great detail, we have to continue to foster those. And what I also say too is like, don't preemptively bend the knee. If there is something that we are doing already that works well, keep doing it, especially in this environment. And that's everything from innovation to transportation. The fact that most small businesses are involved in the very important supply chains that help us manufacture these things, all those things must be taken into account. So the best thing that we can do is to provide certainty, but to clearly communicate where we stand and why this relationship remains intact.
Thank you. I love those points about certainty and being able to put up some sort of resistance a little bit in some ways. And I appreciate that you were doing that. My husband had a small business. He would say it's not small because he had 50 people, but he was importing knives and tools. And he's retired now. And every day he says to me, I am so glad I am not in that business.
And I'm going to come back to the communication conversation because, again, as policymakers, we talk about institutions, policies, and laws. What we need to do better is describe how these things affect people's daily lives. So we have a housing shortage. We rely on Canada for lumber. And it doesn't mean that we don't want to source anything from the United States, but we have to be realistic. So what I often say to folks, if we want to build more housing in local communities, then we have to have good relationships with a lot of our allies. And having these bilateral trade deals can be great, but I tell folks that China looms very large with every one of our trade partners and is part of this supply chain. So how do we do this in a thoughtful way to get the work that we need to have done here at home and in Canada, but also just thinking very carefully that this supply chain is completely interconnected.
Yeah, great example of reminding us of the power of storytelling along with the data and unforeseen consequences, you know, which we are reading about virtually every day or listening to our radio and televisions about if it's in the case of Congressman Larson. I want to switch to you, Representative Larson, to ask a question about transportation and infrastructure. Yay! So in this case, the question is really about federal policy evolution in areas of high-speed rail or other points of entry that could be more modernized. And then the question gets a little bit tricky because it says at the same time, you need to do things that are climate resilient as you think about some of these infrastructure projects. Can you just sort of broadly address federal policy and infrastructure projects like high-speed rail, cross-border kinds of ports of entry?
Thanks. No, I can't.
This guy's a troublemaker, you know, it's like, yeah.
So under President Biden's signature infrastructure bill, the BIL, bipartisan infrastructure law, we put in a pre-funded fancy DC term as an advanced appropriation, but no one knows what that means. And trying to get people to speak English when they talk to Americans about what's going on in DC. So we pre-funded, we put money in ahead of time to the tune of $66 billion over the life of the bill, about 5 years, for Amtrak and rail. And I won't get into the details of how it's broken out, but some of that is for the federal-state partnership. There are states like Washington State, Oregon, that partner with Amtrak to provide the Amtrak service. So there's money for that. There's money for the Northeast Corridor, DC to New York and beyond a little bit. And there's money to establish and reestablish higher speed rail corridors. I think in my lifetime, from this point forward, we're probably not going to get a national high speed rail system. We will probably get regional higher speed systems in place. And next month, the New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama line will open up. It's a higher speed rail, a lot of federal money in that out of the BIL will be going into place. That's public and private. There's also the Brightline East and Brightline West, which is largely privately funded. That is important. Those are important investments. And here in the Northwest, we have the dream of a Cascadia rail line, and the dollars that we've been trying to get out the door out of the federal resulted in $49 million for our state for that, for our region for that. But this is largely going to be driven by the state with federal dollars. I think it's important to note that the recent draft bill from the House of Representatives for the spending bill when it comes to rail is anemic. And which is I don't know if this is ironic. Sorry, Canada, Atlanta Smart Set screwed up the definition of ironic. I have no idea what it means anymore. But I think this is ironic in that the president's budget does not spend as much in Amtrak. At the same time, he is literally taking credit for Amtrak spending taking place around the country. So we're going to hold him accountable to the credit he wants to take for the spending that came out of Biden's signature bill in order to try to leverage that into additional spending for high-speed rail corridors like we have in Cascadia. But I think it's important for us to recognize that we're the only ones really, there's one in the East Coast smaller, but that is really cross-border, Vancouver to Bellingham, Vernon, a little stop in Stanwood, Everett, And then farther south in places that we do a lot, and down to Eugene. So we have it, we don't want to do it, we have a plan, putting plans in place. But that's just part of it. That's just part of the infrastructure investment that we need to continue. Again, if we want to continue the job creating infrastructure investment, we're getting to the BIL, resulted in thousands of women and men working in construction across the country, brought unemployment levels down below 4%. That will help us counter the creeping inflation that we're going to see because of tariffs. Then investing in these jobs is going to be extremely important. We get a chance to do that for the next 5 years in this committee. And so ask all of you to be part of that conversation, help us help ourselves to get these investments done.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up question, and either of you can answer, but you know, I'm always surprised, not surprised, but I'm always reminded when I go to, you know, the counties that are not part of King County about the number of goods and that get transports with rail. Is when you talk about high-speed rail, like you're laughing all of a sudden. Are you talking about you're talking about worker mobility? But I think there's, you know, a fair bit in terms of just moving goods and services in an efficient way that's maybe lower carbon. Is there anything that's...
I'm only laughing because just today, I won't tell people where I live specifically. If you want to protest in front of my place, you can go to the county records like everyone else has to. That said, it looks out over the BNSF line, and someone was selling a place that next to where we live, and so I stopped by and talked to the realtor about how things are going, and he said, "Well, how often do these trains go?" It's like, dude, they forever. It is the railroad. It goes on forever, like a lot, and like every day, and sometimes at night, BNSF. I see and hear the train cars going by, pulling goods north, pulling goods south, all the time. The amount of things, and I'm not shilling for the railroads here, but we move a lot of stuff by truck. We move a lot of stuff by rail in every country, but in our country we do. And our challenge on Amtrak is, at least in the Northwest, we use the same tracks that are owned by BNSF. So there's a lot of coordination that has to happen there. That's why some of these investments in sidings, SIDIGS sidings, as well as in other extensions are so important so that we can have a more robust system of passenger on the lines that cover that each freight as well. But we move a lot of freight by rail.
Yeah, I grew up in the Midwest, and actually the sound of rail cars at night is kind of a comforting thing, you know. I always heard it when I was going to sleep, so, you know, you can tell me where you live later, and, you know, maybe I'll think about that too. Okay, all right, so when speaking about housing, I'm gonna come back to you, Representative Strickland. You talked a little bit about housing and some of the issues and ways in which we can help boost supply, but could you go a little bit deeper? What's Congress doing? What more could we do to address affordable housing shortages and ways in which we could continue the U.S. Canadian collaboration on that issue?
So as you look at housing in the United States, we have a supply problem. And coming from local government, I can tell you with great certainty that the biggest barrier to building more housing is local land use. And we often hear people say, we need to build more affordable housing, but don't you put it in my neighborhood. And then whenever there is a permit that's being pulled or plans for housing being announced, someone will litigate. It gets drawn out. The developer can't waste time and money, and nothing gets built. So as I think about policies I would like to see, 2 Congresses ago, there was a bill called Build Back Better, more brilliant communication coming from the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate. And the plan was to make a massive investment in housing that would really help jumpstart the fact that government alone cannot build all the affordable housing that we need, and we must work with the private sector building community to make things happen. So I'm hoping that some version of that does return at some point when I'm in the party that's in the majority, because I've not heard anything come out of this administration. But I will also talk about the whole idea of permitting. And, you know, I tell folks that sometimes you take advantage of the situation that you're in. And this administration wants to streamline and do everything a lot faster. Now, there's always a danger of going around rules that keep our environment safe and clean and do things. But if there's an opportunity here to say that we can expedite permitting in a way, let's take advantage of it. And one example that I think of is that Washington State has one of the most high standards when it comes to environmental and permitting. So if there is federal funding involved, why go through the same process again at the federal level if our standards are already higher to begin with? That's a way to expedite something. I would also say too, as we look at, again, the supply chain and where we're getting materials to build housing, this is where trade policies with our allies have to be thoughtful and have to be smart. You all can help us solve our problem when it comes to housing supply, but it's also going to require local, state, and federal government to work together and to not have local government or state government look at the feds exclusively for money. And I think there's a way for us to incentivize local and state government. So we can say, there's a pot of money available, but in order for you to be eligible for it, here's some land use rules you have to have in place that will allow more housing to be built. And I have been in every battle possible about every type of housing coming to every neighborhood. And it is often town halls filled with angry people. They don't want those apartments in their neighborhood because they moved to a single family home. I even heard someone once say that snipers would be on top of a 5-story apartment building pointing guns at an elementary school across the. This is how fired up people get about land use. And I'm not mocking anyone or saying that we're going to put up 300-unit buildings in every neighborhood, but we need more housing. And that means we have to be willing to do what we do to make it happen. So I would say work with federal government, incentivize local government to have permitting in place. And if there's a chance to expedite permitting and processes, let's take advantage of that and let's get it done.
You know, that permitting issue is one that, people feel, in virtually every way in which they feel, whether it's business or for housing. So
I think it's more contentious than land use.
absolutely. So just.
Can I just say, it's been the council in Salish County. And when I got elected to Congress, I was so happy I didn't have to do both of them. And in my first year, we invaded Afghanistan. Still.
So the issue of local culture and not in my backyard is harder to deal with than what we, military policy in Afghanistan. Yeah. Interesting.
It's very up close and personal. It's like infantry in the military.
Is there anything culturally that you found that, to deal with, when people respond in those ways with you?
I would say that as elected officials, we collect a lot of information. We do our research, and we have to ask ourselves one simple question when it comes to housing. Do we want to build more housing or don't we? And if something is a barrier to making that happen, then we're actually conceding that, okay, we really don't want to build more housing.
Pretty binary. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna switch topics. We talked about railroads, Representative Larson, now we're gonna talk about airplanes. Can you tell us how you might think about U.S. and Canada collaborating in the area of aerospace and in particularly sustainable aviation? Let me just start with, do you really believe in sustainable aviation? Is that really gonna happen?
Does anyone here have a definition of sustainable aviation? Can you help me with? So let me start off that. Go back to the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. Not the final of the hockey. I was there. So, but for me, but I was behind the goal. I was actually right behind what was one of the greatest games ever. Someone's going to say great. It was a great hockey. But in preparation for that, we for the first couple of a year and a half before, we're talking to the FAA about this because we assumed a lot of folks would be flying in. And what I found out is just in my district, so just I think North Puget Sound, there was 30 plus airports, airfields, places people fly into. There's all over the place, at least on our side of the border. So to build this security perimeter in the air around Vancouver required a transport solution. And so we had to get FAA to talk to the federal folks in Canada about how we're going to protect airspace. And so that's just, again, one example of doesn't make the news, it's happening, it's got to happen every day. These things have to happen or to make other things happen. And I think we were talking a little bit with Bruce, Agnew, beforehand, a little bit about hydrogen, another set of issues. But sustainable aviation it's kind of three steps, right? One is sustainable aviation fuel, liquid fuel, it's SAF. The next is electric propulsion. And the next then is hydrogen. And in order of timeline, that's how sustainable aviation is going to, at least in the US, that's the plan. The plan in Europe is SAF and then skipping electricity to go to hydrogen. So that's kind of how they see it. Them over there in Europe. So now it's an important question to answer about how to time this thing. Do you spend the money on electric to get to hydrogen? Is there a role for electric long term while hydrogen also comes into play? Frankly, hydrogen is not ready now, so you have supply chain issues, delivery, production, and the size and the pressurization of pipelines to deliver hydrogen versus using liquid fuel pipelines. There's all these tedious things, I guess. Electric, we got great companies here in Washington State and around the country looking at electric propulsion. I would note we got some great companies as well in the US, in Everett, looking at hydrogen as well. And again, I don't want to, they will get there. And we need to decide as a US policy how important it is to support these companies to help them get there sooner rather than later. And so I think that there are certainly cross-border opportunities for similar companies to work together so that we can get there. But there just are a lot of challenges. Again, the supply chain issues. Where's the hydrogen come from? How do you deliver it? How do you create it? How do you deliver it? There's the physics of using hydrogen or electric. So you can't break the rules of physics. You can't, but you can discover that you haven't actually gotten even anywhere near what the rules of physics allow you to do. And that's kind of where the federal government needs to come in to help with help these companies make it happen. So I just would offer to you that the world of sustainable aviation is still fairly wide open, and it's going to stay that way in a good sense because people are pushing how to push the envelope, how to redefine what sustainability is and how to get there. Meantime, more efficient engines on how we travel now is extremely important, and a lot of work's taking place as well.
Okay, can I ask you a question that wasn't on the list of questions? You said I could ask you.
You could, because honestly, I didn't really look at the list of questions. I wouldn't even know.
Okay, all right, you wouldn't even know. Okay, so you're really talking about, you said something about the laws of physics can't be changed, but they can. And I think we're finding that with some of the research happening with artificial intelligence and the ability to, use AI to discover new things, material science. What do you think about the importance of collaboration cross-border at the research and academic level?
That's
I think you can both answer that.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point. Not that it can change the laws of physics. So we all everyday scientists, everyday people like me wake up and think, well, the laws of physics limit us. And scientists wake up and say, we actually don't know the limits of the laws of physics. And the role of the federal government in its R&D side of things, whether it's in quantum computing or in AI or aviation or name it, is to kickstart this work that is going to benefit everybody. And so that's where that's why it's important that we have these kinds of initiatives in aviation, whatever. And AI is in transportation Northern Maryland, sorry, but,
Will you?
and yeah, sure, eventually. See, it's AI in transportation, people think AI in transportation is autonomous vehicles. And I think AI, when I say AI, I think, oh, it's ChatGPT. And that's the popular notion of things. But AI in transportation means a lot of things. It means better land use planning, it means better traffic management, it means safer roads, it means safer bridges. Because there's things you can do only, yet they have to do artificially. Because you can't test materials on a live bridge to see if it's safe. Because it will be safe. No one would ever cross it, so it never fall down. I wouldn't recommend, but you can do it in the lab, if you will. And there are folks at Carnegie Mellon doing this on bridges, as a for instance. And so these AI tools can be used to experiment where you can't experiment otherwise in a variety of areas, and we're, 10% of transportation.
So I've got a bit of a hot take here. So you asked the question about sustainable aviation, and Rick, you said, what exactly does that mean? And I was thinking to myself, I asked that question about AI. What exactly are you talking about here? Because I've lost track of the number of task forces in Washington, D.C. that are dedicated to AI, and people still can't tell me exactly what it is they're working on. I'm digressing. So my hot take is sustainable aviation. So first of all, we are here to promote economic development and to help businesses be successful and to talk about cross-border collaboration and to make sure this relationship stays strong. But when I think about the phrase sustainable aviation, I think about sustainability. A planet that is on fire, crazy temperatures, flooding, all these natural disasters tied to climate change. So when I hear what is sustainable aviation, my first thought is that airplane trip really necessary? Now, airlines don't want to hear that. People developing fuel don't want to hear that. But I think that's a legitimate question to ask. Is that trip really necessary? When we were having the debate here in the Puget Sound region, yet again, about where we were going to site a second airport, because every major metropolitan area in the country, our size, has at least 2 large airports, we couldn't get anything cited. And one of the things I said to some audience members who were there to tell me why they would never put an airport anywhere in my district, because every site was in my district, I said, but this is an opportunity maybe to look at high-speed rail as an alternative to flying if we can actually get it to be ultra-high speed, not the United States version of ultra-high speed. I'm talking about Japan, China, places where it really, really, really goes fast. And so I think, again, sustainable aviation fuel, obviously, R&D important, but I think let's not lose sight of the bigger prize here. We want to reduce our carbon footprint. So I think the question I ask, and it's a rhetorical one, is that trip even necessary?
I just note that 33,000 women men go to work in my district every day at Boeing and say, yes, absolutely. But I will also say they're more than willing to be at the forefront of making flight cleaner and greener and more sustainable.
And there are opportunities around the globe to sell those planes to people who are traveling.
But there's some renewable fuels being developed that are, potential. I mean, I think it's a long time out, but
What we have to do is we have to make sure that those fuels have adequate private sector investment and that they go to market and that they get adopted by enough companies so that the price goes down, because right now they're prohibitively expensive. That's the big problem. So work with private sector, go to market, get enough adoption, and then have the price go down.
Okay, we have only a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you each a question just to sort of send us off to think about our panel, our work over the next couple of days. So Representative Strickland, you've got this background in local economic development. Where do you see the greatest potential for U.S. Canada collaboration in regional prosperity?
So when I was at the Seattle Chamber, I was part of the whole effort for the Cascadia Innovation Corridor. And I remember telling Governor Gregoire at the time, because she heads up Challenge Seattle, is that the ultra high-speed rail is the sexiest, most interesting part of that whole project because it's tangible. We can talk about research, agriculture, R&D, science, technology, all these things we want to do together, but that's actually the sweet spot. And so I just think of transportation as being so integral to so many things that we want to do. What's also extra exciting about that project is that it involves British Columbia, Washington State, and Oregon. So you have willing partners who want to put in and do this, but you know we need federal support to do it. So when I think about collaboration, I think it starts with transportation, moving people between borders easily and quickly and not having to spend so much time on the road. And then also too, exchanging ideas. When I was mayor, I was deeply involved with sister cities. And this is a program started by President Eisenhower that really had the purpose of saying, look, governments and leaders come and go, and sometimes you're friends with someone and sometimes you're not. But it's the people-to-people relationships that make all the difference. I am a very big proponent of student exchange. And it sounds almost weird to talk about U.S. Canada exchange because I feel like U.S. and Canada are like siblings in the same family. I don't even think of Canada necessarily as like, quote, a foreign country because I feel like it's just part of who we are together. But more student exchange, more people getting to know each other, and just more one-on-one contact, person-to-person contact to foster these relationships.
Great. Representative Larson, long-term collaboration.
Yeah, well, I laid out in my opening comments the opportunities we have, and I think I want to just underscore what I said there is that regardless of what is happening at the federal level, we in this region have things we need to work on. And so for the next 3 days or how long you're here, hand-wringing over federal policy will happen. I don't say you shouldn't do it, but obviously don't forget there's a lot of things that we're doing regionally that could in fact be the foundation of federal policy later, maybe not the next 2 to 3 years, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe, yeah. So really, kind of understand that there's a lot that's already baked into our foundation here in this economic region, and we need to build on that and either drag people along or leave them behind, one or the other. I don't think because you have allies, I think, at the federal level here in Washington State, and I'm sure in BC and Idaho, Canada, Alaska, and looking all right over in Saskatchewan. Is that as far as west as y'all go?
Yeah. Yep.
They're allies that maybe you don't get the big thing done, but we can get some of the medium-sized things done while we're waiting to get the big things done. Like,
So keep moving. I think I should say.
And one thing I want to add, I was at the
You
airport.
guys are so
I'm
talkative.
sorry, I know, now we're all chatty because it's about to close, it's human nature. And, I was talking with someone about just the strain that the relationship has right now. And it's not like we have to continue these one-on-one relationships and all these amazing things we're doing together as companies and collaborators. But we also can't presume that the message coming from big government and the White House is suddenly going to change because people's feelings didn't get hurt and a nation didn't feel disrespected by some of the words coming from this administration. I'm acutely aware of that. And so again, anything we can do to make sure that people understand that this relationship is important. You are an ally to us. We value you, we treasure you, and we understand how important we are to each other. I don't think we can say that enough as elected officials.
we're gonna battle the last word. I was in
To drag you off.
I was in Vancouver. It's going to be on the way. I was on CBC radio. We were the guy who visited the local CBC radio, and after all this discussion, it was after the original tariffs announcement. And he said, "Well, we'd love to have you back." I said, "Great." He said, "If you need me on every once in a while to be the Congress whisperer for British Columbia, I will do that." So I will let you say what I know and to try to explain what is happening in the U.S. and you all can agree or not agree, but try to explain what's going on, because I think that having those discussions is just continues to be important because you can't shut down.
Please join me in thanking these panelists. Great representatives.
Congressional Whisperer. All right. Thank you so very much, Mary. This was fantastic. I really loved it. And of course, Representative Strickland and Larson. And actually, Representative Larson and I overlap in our district. So I've had the privilege of working with him for more than 10 years. So, and he's fantastic. And so now I wanted to thank the evening sponsor, the Government of Canada. And we have Consul General Craig Whiteful, and he's here to give us some brief remarks. And so please welcome Craig. He is the consulate at the Consulate General of Canada, Seattle. He is a career Foreign Service officer who most recently served as a counselor with the Environment and Energy Program at Canada's Embassy in Washington, D.C. So must have been a whisperer there as well. Over his 25-year diplomatic career, he has served in Rome, Vienna, and Ottawa, in advancing key files from energy and critical minerals to international security. Originally from Ontario, he is also an avid sports outdoorsman and proud honorary Newfoundlander. Welcome.
Thank you, Representative Ryu, Madam President, for the kind introduction, and thank you to Representatives Larson and Strickland for what I thought was a really frank and thoughtful panel discussion and a great kickoff for this 34th Penwar Summit, which is actually my first. So it's a distinct pleasure for me to be here and to attend this summit in person. I began my mandate as Consul General of Canada in Seattle to the Pacific Northwest and Alaska last September. So I'm just about tomorrow, I think I'm a few days from now, I'm at the 10-month mark. Since then, I've had the opportunity to travel throughout this beautiful and productive region. And I've already met with many of you to discuss the relationship between Canada and the United States, with all the opportunities and complexities that it entails. As Representative Ryu just said, I came to the Consulate General here after 5 years at our embassy in Washington, D.C., the other Washington, as they call it out here. And as head of energy and environment, I focused on a lot of Canada-US issues, which are also crucial to this region. Even then, I was familiar with the tremendous work of Penwar, as this organization really does punch well above its weight in its unique model of bilateral cooperation. And so I want to say thank you, Matt. There he is. Thank you, Matt, to you and your great team for your dedication to creating and maintaining lasting connections between the two countries and focusing on problem solving in a cooperative manner. And that's why each year the Government of Canada is proud to support the Penwar Summit and to attend the conference with a robust delegation. And this year at the federal level, we have 5 Canadian senators and members of Parliament who are members of the Canada-US Interparliamentary Working Group coming from Ottawa to attend the summit. And I believe 4 of them are here already, and I'd like to acknowledge them. Please join me in welcoming Senator Michael McDonald. You could wave or stand up if you're in the room. We go with the best information we have at showtime. Senator Marty Deacon. There she is. Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott Canis. Just left, okay, but here, there was a confirmed sighting. And Member of Parliament Dean Allison. Just out in the hall. Well, they're doing their jobs, right? They're out. Yes, so we also have Nana Sloan here with us, who is the president of Pacific Can, who is Canada's federal economic development agency for British Columbia. Nana. We also have representatives from Transport Canada, Global Affairs Canada, our foreign ministry, and of course my team, my great team at the Consulate General of Canada in Seattle, who are well known to this audience. So I look forward to the rich discussions that await us over the next 4 days. And I thank every one of you sincerely for being here and for contributing to the bilateral relationship between our two great countries. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to the mayor of our beautiful host city of Bellevue, Dr. Lynn Robinson. Mayor Robinson joined the Bellevue City Council in 2014 and has been mayor of the city of Bellevue since 2020. She's a strong advocate for startups, affordable housing, and environmental stewardship, and is deeply engaged in regional partnerships. Mayor Robinson, the floor is yours.
Very impressive to see the congressional and consular power here in the room today on a Sunday. Let's give them a huge hand for. So good evening and welcome to Bellevue for your 34th annual summit of the Pacific Northwest Economic District. My name is Lynn Robinson. I'm the mayor of Bellevue, and it's really an honor to welcome you here today. I feel uniquely qualified to do so because I have dual citizenship with Canada. So do you know your theme this year? It's timely and powerful. Does anybody know what it is? Say it with me. Building a resilient future through regional collaboration, innovation and trade. That's strong. Now you're all on the same page, so thank you for doing that with me. Your group has set the gold standard for U.S. and Canada cooperation, bringing policymakers, business executives, academia, nonprofits, and federal leaders to tackle cross-border challenges and shared solutions. The work that you do this week is exactly what our future demands it to be: cooperative, pragmatic, and action-oriented. You've arrived in Bellevue at a time of significant growth, not just in population, but in purpose as well. So I'll just tell you a few things. I know Canada never brags, and I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm bragging. I'm just telling you. We completed our light rail system to Redmond last year, and then next year we'll be going all the way to Seattle. We've increased access to parks in our waterfront. We've doubled our affordable housing stock and attracted some of the most innovative companies in the world. Economic growth, sustainable development, communities resilience, and high quality of life can and should go hand in hand. Just a few blocks from here, you may see it while you're here, is Bellevue Spring District, which I call a TOC. A senator. I call it a TOC, which is transit-oriented community, not a development. And it has received national recognition for having put in the infrastructure in advance of development. We've aligned billions of dollars of public and private investments for light rail, retail and office space, and housing, including affordable housing. Bellevue has an intentional approach to planning and investment. Our nearly $300 million 7-year capital investment program allocates capital funding across all public infrastructure sectors, including modernizing infrastructure, deploying smart utility systems, and preparing for a more climate resilient future. Bellevue has the second largest economy in Washington state. Last year, we welcomed over 1,300 new companies and saw 16 major corporate expansions, including OpenAI, Snowflake, and Pokemon. And startup ecosystem is thriving with initiatives like Startup 425, which focuses on female and minority-owned businesses across the region. Bellevue's diversity isn't just something we value, it's something we build on today. We are one of the most diverse cities of our size in the country, with over 100 languages spoken here, and almost 52% of our residents are foreign-born. Yet we all share a common value for education, which makes for excellent leaders. As you begin this week's conversations on transportation, clean energy, digital infrastructure, workforce development, and more, I hope that you will see some good examples in Bellevue. I know you have a packed agenda, so I'd like to encourage you to check out our downtown park. It only took us 40 years to complete. And I hope you enjoy the culinary diversity of the restaurants in our downtown core. You can shop at one of our nation's most successful malls. And if you have time, you can hail a free electric ride on the Circuit app. Write that down, Circuit, the app. You can enjoy a stroll through the Bellevue Botanical Gardens. Bellevue is honored to stand beside you as partners in shaping a Pacific Northwest built on collaboration, innovation, and shared strength. Thank you so much for coming to Bellevue.
Thank you, Mayor. We are going to go to our reception in a minute, and I just wanted everyone to know that if you haven't downloaded the app, the Hoover app, all the details of the sessions are there. And if you need help at the registration desk, they can help you. We kick off tomorrow morning with a 7:30 breakfast, and our opening ceremony start at 8 o'clock. At 8:30, we'll hear from the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, coming from Ottawa. And we have just a really studied agenda for you. So it's hard to see. There's many things happening at the same time. So try to figure out where you want to go. But I am so grateful that we're having this session here in Bellevue. Very grateful for the congressional leadership here. And I did want to mention that after the reception, which is just behind us, so you go through the back doors or around the side, that's the room directly behind us. At 9 p.m. in the Equus restaurant, which is on the second floor, right over there, will be our hospitality suite. And I hope that you really make an effort to get to know somebody that you haven't met before. Because it's easy to just hang out with your friends. But the best thing about Penwar is really going beyond your boundaries and looking and getting to know people from Canada, from the U.S., and from other jurisdictions. We have amazing highlights. I'll go over them again tomorrow. A hydrogen study that's first in North America will be released tomorrow afternoon. We'll be talking about SAF coalition with some of the key SAF research in the nation. And there's going to be a huge amount of trade and tariff discussion. So I want to thank you all for being here. We'll break for the reception and have a great time and get to know everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is the beginning of a great session. Thank you.